REN TV coverage of the 2013 IRMI Energy Risk and Insurance Conference is sponsored by WebCE. Julia Palmer is a lawyer at the Texas firm of Looper Reed McGraw. We spoke with her at the IRMI Energy Conference about emerging risks, new technologies, and if the insurance industry was keeping up with the energy sector.
The hot topic at the Energy Conference this year has been shale gas development and the recent opinions out of the Deepwater Horizon case. Well, we've had 3 recent orders that have quite an impact. 2 of them deal with indemnity contracts, and 1 of them deals with additional assured status. And they'll have a big impact on the oil and gas industry and how we write and deal with our contracts going forward. With regard to indemnity contracts, Judge Barbier held that you could be indemnified for gross negligence, and this was a hotly debated topic. He found that you could not be indemnified for punitive damages or similar type fines. With regard to the validity of the indemnity agreements, he did reserve 2 issues that seemed quite important. One related to breach of contract. At what level would breach of contract excuse you from honoring indemnity obligations? And fraud. Would fraud set aside an indemnity agreement? The EPA has been rather active with regard to hydraulic fracturing. The EPA has emergency powers and has been active with litigation, but the EPA is also promulgating regulations. One of the areas that they focused on has been air pollution issues, which is something that really had not been looked at before, but they now have new regulations and new standards that the industry is going to have to meet. I believe most of these come into effect by 2015. The University of Texas and MIT both conducted studies, and they identified the environmental risk as being the surface risk as opposed to the subsurface risk as really being the greater challenge for us to deal with. They also looked at whether there was any propensity for blowouts, and they really found very, very low incidence of blowout type issues. So I think it's really focusing on how do we handle the surface issues and how do we address the safety engineering issues. When you have that much equipment concentrated on a well pad, you really need to look at simple things like what are the fire issues. If you're refueling and you have a fire and you catch one truck on fire, they're all connected. How do you now move the equipment to save it, protect other property, because they're all connected? We've had a huge shale gas boom, and there's been many, many changes that have occurred during the last 2 years. Originally, when we began the shale gas development, one of the big issues was water. Water's still a big concern, but now we are recycling a great deal of water, and we're looking at alternate technologies to either frack with LPG or with other types of inert gas. So there's lots of research and development going on that will change. And as that changes, then the risks themselves change, and we need to evaluate and look at those risks to try to figure out how the insurance market should react to those risks. What the insurance industries need to do in order to respond to all these changes is first understand what the insureds are doing. Where is the research? Where is the development? What are the new operations? You have to understand the risk in order to properly insure it and offer a product that makes sense to your insured. Now, recently there was a question posed at a seminar to a large group of energy underwriters, claims people, brokers, and insureds. And there was a question about whether or not the OEE policy is keeping pace with the industry, particularly with regard to shale gas development. And there was an overwhelming response that it was not. The more interesting response was who should then propose the amendments, who should propose the changes. And it came back 1/3 brokers, 1/3 underwriters, and 1/3 insured. So it's interesting that so many people thought that they needed input from the insureds in order to revise and change the policy form.
For more world risk and insurance news from the IRMI Energy Risk and Insurance Conference, visit the REN TV On Demand Library.